Welcome to the Concept Small Business Coaching Webinar, helping the small business owner take their business from where it is to where they want it to be. I'm Dean Simmons with Concept, joined by my colleague John McCarroll, who will be conducting the webinar, and our special guest and small business coaching client, Chris Guidotti, Vice President of Operations at East Branch Engineering and Manufacturing in New Milford, Connecticut. Here's a little background on our presenter, John McCarroll. John has over 50 years of manufacturing experience and has owned and operated his own manufacturing company for 10 of those years, making him ideally suited to address this topic since he has walked in the shoes of the business owner. In addition to providing personal coaching, John assists small and mid-sized manufacturers with the continuous improvement initiatives. During the webinar, our guest, Chris Guidotti, will be weighing in with his personal perspective on the coaching process that John has been conducting with him, sharing the benefits to him and to his company. And with a little background on Chris, he was essentially born into the manufacturing industry when his father, Paul, started their East Branch engineering business in the basement of their home when Chris was 7 years old. East Branch and its 19 employees now serve the medical imaging, aerospace, power systems, commercial printing, and ultrasonic testing industries. In his current role as VP of Operations, Chris draws on his experience to continually make company improvements, program multi-axis CNC precision machines, and can even be found on occasion on a machine making chips. Now, let's get to the webinar. With all that said, I'll turn it over to John McCarroll.
Okay. Thank you, Dean, and welcome everyone to our small business coaching webinar. Thank you for joining. And Chris, my colleague here, thank you for journeying all the way up to Hartford from New Milford on a day that was supposed to be snowy and nasty, but luckily has turned out not to be. So
thanks for having me.
Let's get started. So what is small business coaching and why did we create it? Basically, it's a process that's based on years of talking with owners of small businesses here in Connecticut. That's the basic mission of Concept. It's designed for owner-operator companies with typically under 35 employees. There's no magic number, but as I've said here, it's really owner-operator, where the owner, like Chris was with me here today, is in the business day to day, making the wheels turn, getting product out the door. It's also designed for businesses that what we call are stuck in their current condition. What does that mean? What does stuck look like? So here's a few things that characterize some of the kinds of businesses that we talk to. Perhaps not experiencing any growth. Maybe lost a customer that counts for an important part of the business. Possibly facing lower profits, competition making it tougher and tougher to win jobs. Maybe the need to consider other markets in order to compete. Or in many cases, having a timeline for exiting or transitioning their business. There are other things that categorize stuck, but these are just some of them to give you an idea. Typically, these businesses don't have a real plan to mitigate the situation. It's there, it's a problem, they worry about it, but they haven't got a firm plan for moving forward. Stuck owner behavior looks a little bit like this. The owner's wearing many hats running the business, tends to spend all of his or her time working in the business, but not on it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. These owners often have a sense of being alone. They see their issues as being sometimes overwhelming, and they might welcome having a coach, but they frankly never considered it. Typically, they have a vague sense of where they'd like the business to be in the future, but it's not anything that they've really written down or documented. And as a result, no clear plans for going forward. They're either unable or unwilling to devote the necessary time to develop a plan, let alone actually execute one. So I want to do a little poll here, and I want to ask those of you that are on the webinar to indicate which of these behaviors you possibly see. And you can select one or more of these. Go ahead and do it. So Chris, while the poll's going on, Chris, I'll ask you, what caused you and your father to think about doing small business coaching?
Yeah, thanks, John. We're kind of in the unique position in that we are a family-owned business. My father, as was mentioned earlier, built the company when I was young, and he's on the verge of retirement. So we have the opportunity to create our transition plan, and not only create a transition plan that smoothly transitions, but that can also grow the business at the same time. And I think a lot of the characteristics of a stuck business kind of ring true to us. It's hard to grow a company in current market environment. Growth is really hard, and it's hard to be profitable while maintaining growth. So we were looking for some experience and some coaching to kind of help us guide what we needed to do in the next couple of years.
Great, thank you. So let's look at the results of the poll, and it looks like, okay, you can see it here. I think you can see it here. Splits into two of the categories. About half of the people out there have checked off business has been flat or declining. Another half thinking about exiting or selling the business. And about a half of them say they have no real plans to get unstuck. So this is common. There are other situations as I indicated, but let's move on. Okay. So we talk about working in the business versus working on the business. Typically, small business owners wear many hats. You've probably all heard that refrain about working on the business versus working in the business. May mean different things to different people. So I'd like to propose a specific set of definitions so you know what I'm talking about when I use this terminology. Working in the business means being a revenue producing, product fulfilling member of the team. Getting stuff shipped, basically. Working on the business means designing, planning, refining, improving your business, and basically enhancing its value, but not directly producing revenue. So I'm going to do another very brief poll. I'm going to ask you folks to tell me a little bit about how much of your time you're able to spend working on your business, but not in it. And I'll let you go ahead now and enter those numbers. See, I see the small business as being like a machine, and it's a machine where the owner spends his or her time keeping the machine running and producing revenue. But ideally, the owner should also be spending time working on building a stronger, better, more efficient machine that is working on the business. So should have some balance over time. Let's see if we've got some poll results. Okay. So working on the business instead of in the business, you got about 2/3 indicating about 5% and a third about 10%. And that's high. I've asked a lot of company owner operators this question over time, and the ones the most common answer is somewhere between 0 and 5%, frankly. Okay, let's see. Fine. Okay. So how do we start working on the business? Well, working on the business implies that you have some sort of a plan as to where you want the business to go. Most small businesses, frankly, don't have this. A plan starts with a clear statement of where the owner wants to go. And guess what? Most small businesses don't have this either. So typically when I, excuse me, I'm sorry, first ask a small business owner about what their plans are for the future, I hear something kind of like, I want to take my business to the next level. Very common refrain. And obviously, the next thing I do is I'd ask, well, what does that look like? And I often get what I call the Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart response. Many of you may know this, but when he was asked about defining pornography and what it looked like, he basically said, I'm not so sure, but I'll know it when I see it. this is the kind of answer I get when I ask about taking business to the next level. Chris, what did you tell me when I first met with you and your dad?
Well, ironically, I think it was that exact quote. I think we said, we wanted to see the company at the next level. And you plainly asked, what does that look like? And I think one of the things that's difficult for business owners or people that grow businesses is you have kind of an abstract idea. You're in the business every day and you kind of know what you want to do, but it's really hard to define it and to put it into words.
Okay, thanks. I had forgotten this morning when we were chatting just before we started. Chris said, "Yeah, that's exactly what we said,"
word
and I had forgotten that. But thanks for that. So, what's the purpose of our small business coaching product? First, it helps owners to get a clarity around what they want to achieve, both in their personal lives and with their businesses. It helps them define specifically what that next level looks like. And it's aimed at making a doable plan to actually get there. By a doable plan, we prioritize the elements of the plan, and we create a set of near-term actions for one or two of those elements, and no more. To start out, we only want to focus on a few things because, frankly, the small business owner just doesn't have the bandwidth to do more. So the plan that comes out of this is not an overwhelming list of all the things we got to do to get to the vision. It's much more short-term, hey, here's what we got to do to get started. Additionally, small business coaching product focuses on ways to free up some of the owner's time to allow him or her to actually work on the plan. I'll get into that in more detail later on. Finally, we mentor the owners after we've actually created the plan, and we stick with them to see how the plan's going and to hold some accountability to actually tracking the plan. I've been there and done that. I ran my own business. My career had like three parts to it. I was in the Fortune 50 world for the first half of my career, and then decided what I really wanted to do was own and operate my own small business. So I acquired one. I wish I'd known then what I know now, but it was quite an experience. I found I had few others to lean on for any kind of help or advice here. I had a team of supervisors, but generally to me, supervisors are responsible for the day-to-day activities of their team, getting stuff out the door and shipped. They weren't really managers. To me, a manager is somebody who not only has some of those supervisory responsibilities, but has the responsibility to move his or her part of the business forward, to develop new, better processes and procedures. I was wearing a lot of hats. I was always trying to put out fires. In a perverse way, putting out fires was kind of fun. You could go home at the end of the day and you could sit back, have a scotch or whatever your favorite is, and think, yeah, boy, I got something done today. But putting out fires isn't moving the business forward. Ultimately, I only had a vague idea of where I wanted to go. When I bought that business, I knew I wanted to own a small business. I had an idea that in terms of where I was going with my family and my future, kind of where I want to go, but I never documented, never got it written down, never laid out how I would actually get there. In hindsight, it probably would have been nice to have a knowledgeable coach, somebody I could help think these things through. So, what is the basic process? It's really quite straightforward. It's not rocket science, as they say. I tend to think like an engineer. I see it as a pretty straightforward process. First, we look at where we are today, and then we define what the future should look like. And we get specific here in doing this. Since we can't immediately do all the things we need to do, we create a list of what needs to be done to get from where we are today to where we want to be in the future. And we prioritize it, and we focus only in the beginning on one or max two things to do to get there, because again, the owner just doesn't have bandwidth to do more. With that, we put together a doable action plan. But my term doable. Doable means it's a plan that's scaled to the ability of the owner to actually get some specific things done. And finally, we track that plan together and make sure that we're getting results. So at a 30,000 foot level, that's our coaching model. It's designed to take your business from where it is today to where you want it to be. Otherwise, you get into situations like we've exposed this program to a fair number of people, and I typically always get exciting reactions. Your clients that say, "This is exactly what I need. Please send me a proposal." What happens sometimes is, though, we send a proposal and we don't hear anything for a while. And so we go back and say, "Hey, how's it going? You still thinking of doing this?" Yeah, I really want to do this, but I'm right in the middle of a big firefight right now. And so, can you call me back in a month? And we do. And then it's, well, I'm in an even bigger firefight. Can you call me back in 2 or 3 months? And that kind of tends to go on. And so often after as many as 9 months or so, we go back and we touch base with the owner and we find out, same situation. They're exactly where they were when we first talked to them and nothing else has happened. So my advice at that point is, look, if you just keep doing what you've been doing, then it's likely you're just going to keep getting what you've been getting. And so I try and encourage them to do something to move it forward. That's what this is all about. So how is it delivered? It's delivered by working one-on-one with an owner. In some cases, like with Chris and his dad, we do 2-on-1. I've got a number of client situations where we've got virtually an identical thing. The current owner, principal owner, is getting ready to retire and wants to build the business in such a fashion that when he turns it over to his heir, it's in a position to run smoothly and profitably, and in most cases, perhaps generate some ongoing income to the retired person. We take them through a process that uses simple, structured exercises. It's a series of 12 coaching sessions. The first 6 sessions, 2-hour sessions, we're essentially working on developing a plan. And we capture all of this on what we call a 1-page plan. I'll show you what that is later. We're not trying to make it fairly simple and straightforward and not too complex. After we have the plan in place, we do 6 follow-up sessions over time to track progress and to assure owner accountability. Owner accountability makes some owners a little uncomfortable. A lot of small business owners out there have been, the top of the pyramid and haven't had to be accountable to anybody except maybe their wives or husbands. But I think in most cases, even though it makes them a bit uncomfortable, they all recognize that it's an important thing to do. So Chris, what was your situation at East Branch?
Yeah, so as John mentioned earlier, it's even hard to find time to look at the proposals. And I can't tell you how many phone calls we got. Did you look at the proposal? Did you look at the proposal?
Not for me.
Not from you. But it's a really valid point that eventually you need to carve time out to work on this stuff. You need to find time to stop putting out the fires and really rely on your team to give you a 2-hour window to first look at the proposal and understand what it is, and then once you do sign the contract, to have some time with John to sit down and really start hammering out some of the details. 2 hours in a week, it's not that hard to find the time. You may have to just adjust your schedule a little bit here and there, but the 2 hours goes really quick, and you can get a lot done in those 2 hours. And once the ball starts rolling, I think it's easier to see the benefit of taking time out and at least starting the process.
Thanks, Chris. So let's talk about the program flow. How do these sessions, particularly the first 6 sessions, begin? So We start at what I refer to as point A, which is where are we now? And as I mentioned, we go through a series of fairly straightforward exercises to begin to get that definition. We look at key operating metrics. We do an organizational assessment. We look at something called the 8 drivers of value. We hammer out a vision statement. Let me dive into these things just a little bit more detail. An organizational assessment essentially is sitting down and looking at, who are the members of your existing team specifically? What are their strengths and weaknesses? What are their roles? What's their long-term potential or lack of it? And we get that documented as part of where we are now. We also begin right here to look a little bit out into the future. We say, well, if we're beginning to approach what we think we might like to be in about roughly 3 years, what might that organization structure look like? And it gives us insight to this important thing, the human resource. You've all heard the statement, the old saw, people are your most important resource. Well, guess what? That's really true. And as a result, it's an important thing for us to look at. So we do that part of our upfront thing. We also look at a roadmap for getting to the next level. We use a system called Value Builder. Value Builder examines key drivers of the value of the business. So let me go back to that quote of, hey, I want to take my business to the next level. I struggled for years to define that. And then one day it dawned on me. The level of a business is indicated by its value. So what would a sophisticated buyer pay to acquire a company? A business at the next level is a stronger, more efficient running machine, and as such has greater value. So we use this tool called Value Builder, and it gives us understanding of the things that we would most likely need to work on over time in order to get to that next level. It helps us focus on things that drive essentially the multiples in an equation that sets valuation on a business. Whether we're going to interested in selling the business or transitioning the business, and that's way down the road, I feel that looking at the things that build the value of your business are keys to a plan going forward. So that's why we use that tool. We also write a mission statement. I've seen dozens of mission statements all over the years. Some of them I don't like much at all. I won't call them what I just about called them. We try and keep it down to a pretty simple definition. For me, a mission statement, at least in this exercise, is all about defining what your company does right now. It's as simple as saying, what do you make or do? Who do you do it for? And possibly, if you've got some credible differentiation, we might include that. By credible deviation, I mean, if you want to claim, hey, we have great on-time delivery, unless you have best-in-class on-time delivery and you've got documentation that proves that, I don't consider that a credible differentiation. Hey, lots of people say, we got great people. Well, everybody's got great people.
Got great quality and great delivery.
Great quality and great delivery. But if you've got a credible differentiator, we would include that in the mission statement. So next, we focus on what I call point B. Where do we want to go? And in that case, exercises we do in that area are built around something called personal aim and a vision statement and related goals that tie back to those two things. Personal aim. What is personal aim? Personal aim is all about where you want to go in your life, and particularly with some relationship to your business and how your business helps you get there. Your financial goals and lifestyle goals and legacy, you want a legacy in your business, etc. Some of you may have read the book, The E-Myth. If you have, an E-Myth, he actually calls it primary aim. This is very similar. It's about life goals. I'm gonna surprise Chris. We hadn't talked about this, but do you recall some of what you because in the case of Paul and his dad, we had them do separate personal aims because they are separate. Maybe you comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, so, I've had the pleasure of working with my father for 15 some odd years now. And, we've always talked about what we want to do, but never quite the personal, like, what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself in the next couple of years? And when we went through this exercise, we filled it out separately and then compared notes. And, it's really interesting when you hear, what your father wants to do in retirement, and, some of his drivers before, like, building the business, like why he built the business and what he sees himself doing in his retirement. It's really eye-opening. And I think it helps not only build the business, but build a relationship between, myself and my father. So it was a really eye-opening experience, and to be guided by John, I think really helped us kind of direct that conversation into, the outcome that we got from it.
Yeah, it was a fun exercise. I enjoyed seeing Chris and his dad going back and forth and hammering these things out, and they were able to make a relatively clear statement. I know when I bought my business, I did not have a personal aim, and I told these guys I wish I had. I really, truly wish I had. Would have made my life, I think, a little bit easier in hindsight. But all part about being a coach is I've had lots of experiences, and I've done some things that I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do.
Well, we would never have thought to do this without John's help. I mean, we've always talked about it again, but never really wrote it down on paper.
Yeah, and that's an interesting exercise. So from there, we move into writing an actual vision statement about what the company looks like in the future, and it ties back to that personal aim. And so I've got some fairly specific guidelines about what I like to see in a vision statement for this kind of exercise. A vision statement for me is a word picture of the future. What does it look like? What does it look like that's different from what it looks like today? And it's something that, if well written, can be visualized and can be measured. It contains typically an overarching future goal. There's something out there that in the industry people call a bag, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Don't love the term, but it typically does contain a goal like that. And of course, it supports the personal aim to say, okay, I'm going to build a business 3 years down the road that supports those things that we just talked about. And it should be compact and easy to remember. I say ideally one sentence. Sometimes it's hard to get into one sentence. I like to say my junior high school English teacher would cringe at some of the run-on sentences we write. But ideally, it's easy to remember and compact. I had a vision statement when I ran my own small business, and actually, not to toot my horn, but I thought it was a pretty good one because it was compact and easy to remember. And I always tell the story about my truck driver, Danny O'Neill, could tell you what my vision was in his words and get it spot on right. And that's a goal I have my people aspire to. Can somebody down in the organization repeat back what the vision is for the future? This is critical. This really drives everything, the vision statement. So we got a point A and we got point B, and then we do a few things moving forward out of that. So first thing we do is, okay, to get from A to B, what are the things we need to do to get there? It's a list of what I call what's. Some people call these things strategies. I don't like to use the term strategies with small business owners because it sounds just a little bit too consultancy for me. So what are the things we need to do? And then we prioritize them. We pick the top one or two, as I mentioned earlier, because you just can't you don't have the bandwidth to work on more than those one or two. In parallel, off to the side, we do some exercises on creating a plan to free up the owner's time, because you can't work on a plan if I don't have the bandwidth to do it. And once we've done those two things, then we create this doable action plan. Doable, again, is it's sized to fit what we've got the resources to do going forward. I like to try and get this stuff done in the first 5 or 6 sessions. As Chris said, typically we meet 2 hours. In the beginning, I like to meet once a week if possible. and y'all have got businesses to run, and I know that's sometimes hard, but I like to get the plan done as quickly as we can. And then the following sessions are just tracking the plan. And plans have a way of going left and right and needing to be adjusted. But that's the process we go through. In terms of how do we find time for you to spend working on your business, excuse me, what we do is we do a little exercise, daily time tracking. So I asked Chris and his dad as an example to keep a little notepad, maybe set their iPhones to every 60 minutes. And when the iPhone rings, just simply write down one word or a short phrase. What's the principal thing you did in the last hour? And we collect that data for maybe a couple of 2 or 3 weeks and begin to see what it looks like, where you go. We also, after we've collected that data, I sit back and I ask, well, out of all these things you do, what do you like and what don't you like? Because that's important. Because if we're going to cut things out, typically we like to look at what people don't like. Chris's dad, Paul, had his biggest hunk of time, as it turned out, was in an area he didn't like at all. So we decided we try and address this. And then we look at alternatives. Out of these things that you're doing, can we delegate things? Can we get part-time help? Where you're putting out fires all the time, do you really have to put out fires? I had a colleague once who talked about firefighting, and he said, there's some fires that you can let burn out. And I shuddered at that thought, but in the end, it's really true. You don't have to put every fire out. So we look at some alternatives, and we decide how to free up some time. And this becomes essentially our initial action plan. So the first thing we do is say, okay, let's do whatever we've got to do to free up the time to work on the business. Chris, I don't know if you want to comment on this exercise, and maybe I'll flip over to my next slide. Here's a slide that shows you where Chris spends his time, and talk about wearing many hats. This is what we discovered, believe it or not. Maybe you'd comment on it.
Yeah, so when owner operators are running a business, we don't really focus on what we're doing. We know we're doing something that's moving the business along, but defining it is really what's helpful here. When I was getting my MBA, one of my instructors, a guy by the name of Mike Davis, who I think was at Nestle at the time, he said, you need to get the right people on the bus, figure out where your bus is going, and you need to train those people to do your job. If you have any hopes of advancing your career or advancing the company, you need to backfill everything you're doing. So understanding what you're doing day to day is really key to this whole process. It was pretty shocking how much time I was spending, on setting a machine up or programming. And those are skills that you can easily train. You may have a guy that you want to develop into this. So it's easy to see that, if I spend some time training someone to set a machine up, I can free up, 17% of my day. And that could be enough time to start working on the business. So it's a really eye-opening experience to see exactly how much time you're spending in your day-to-day life. And I think when you run through the exercises, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. So when we developed the ongoing plan, one of the very principal things was we want to look at a couple of new hires in some areas like setup and programming. If we can execute that, hasn't been easy. We haven't found them yet.
Still working on it.
But it's kind of number one on the list. Chris's dad, Paul, had a big chunk. He had 40% of his time on quoting, on doing estimating. And and he said, I hate that. I don't like doing estimating. So we devised a way to get him out of at least part of the estimating thing, get some of the nuts and bolts, front end kind of work done by others that we want to train. So all of this, once we've done the analysis, we capture and we put together a plan. We do what we call a one-page plan. It looks like an A3 for those of you that are familiar with A3s. It kind of flows from the upper right-hand corner, which is information about the current state, data we collected through that value builder, the organizational chart exercise, et cetera. Flows to the right where we begin to look at the future, that's things like personal aim and vision, and then down and flows back across the bottom, which says, okay, well, what are some near-term goals to support the vision? What do we have to do to attain those goals? Remember, what's are really, you could call them strategies, I call them what's. What are the one or two priority things? In Chris's case and all, it was filling those roles that we talked about just a moment ago. And then some action plans to realize those strategies. Okay, and we're going to go out, we're going to hire somebody, we're going to train somebody, we're going to do, in your case, we're thinking about doing some training on setup reduction, et cetera. And we try and capture it on one page. We try and keep it simple. So that kind of wraps up to a great extent what the process is and how we do it. I don't know, Chris, if you have any overall comments on this.
Yeah, I mean, going through the process, and we're towards the end of our time now, but one thing that's really clear through this is really how key people are in your organization to get to your vision and achieving your mission. As owner operators, we were always the guys that were responsible for putting the fires out and getting the stuff out the door. But as you look towards, some future goals, you can't always be the one guy that does that. Any owner that wants to go on vacation surely has felt this when it takes 3 weeks of prep work just to take 3 days off. Mm-hmm. So really the key, I think, and John, you mentioned this earlier, is you really need to get the right people in your organization. And once they're there, you need to have a plan to develop them. I think that was, I don't want to say shocking, but it really solidified how much that's true once you go through all the exercises and you really see this organization is built on people. It's not built on machines. It's not built on what cutting tools you use. It's built on the people you have in your organization.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you again very much. So we'd love to work with this on small business consulting. And just remember, if you just keep doing what you've been doing, then you're likely going to just keep getting what you've been getting. So we are happy to help you break that cycle. Thank you.
All right. Well, that will do it for today's webinar on small business coaching. We will be getting a recorded version out to you as well. Please feel free to share it with others. I'd like to thank Constep's John McCarroll for leading this presentation and Chris Ghiatti of East Branch Engineering for his insightful participation. If you are interested in learning more about how small business coaching can help you get your business where you want it to go, simply email us at the address on the screen, which is info@constep.org. And then a Constep regional manager for your area will contact you to schedule a meeting with John. Thank you for attending today's webinar on small business coaching. This concludes the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Dean.